So as Rick mentioned, we are beginning a new series of conversations. I like to call them conversations, even though I'm the only one that actually gets to talk. But it sounds better. So around creating community. Because as you know, we are in the midst of a big move. We're going to move into our new home in a couple months, and the illusion sometimes is that the form is the thing. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes we think in our own lives the money is the thing, or the house is the thing, or the relationship is the thing. And what we would suggest in our teaching is that there is spirit that houses itself into form. So the real thing is what Ernest Holmes referred to as the thing itself, the spiritual wisdom, intelligence, divine creative power behind everything that exists in form. And so it's important, I think, for us now to spend a little time over this next month to revisit what it is that creates community. Because it is not the building that creates our community, it is us creating a community that is housed by a building. Yes, important thing to know. So I wanted to start this conversation around the idea of values. What do we hold most dear? What do we hold most sacred? A number of years ago, when we were some version of United something or other, we could have been the Church of Religious Science or Centers, I don't know what we were. I think we were United Church of Religious Science at that time. 10 or so years ago, we looked around at our organization and said, wow, we are on a direct path towards death. This organization is either needs to change or die. And so some of us got together and said, well, let's not die, What do we need to do? Because as organizations do, they go through growth periods and then they decline. And if something doesn't shift, they just go into decline. So we looked around and we said, well, how do we do this differently? Why is there conflict? Why is there strife? Here we are, these highly enlightened beings, me, of course, being a little more enlightened than the rest of them, but, highly enlightened beings, all believing in a spiritual idea and principle, wanting to make a difference in the world. What's wrong here? And as we hired some consultants to help us, they helped us to understand that we did not have shared values. That's an interesting thing. It's not that we didn't have values, but we didn't have shared values. So as we did this values survey, what we realized was some people felt like this was the most important things, others felt like this was the most important things. So the first thing we would do well to understand about values is they're all lovely and beautiful. However, values can either divide us or bring us together. So if you think about that, the big debate that has been ongoing for many years in our country, and I'm not taking a side here, I'm just wanting to point this out, is the idea of abortion. And so on one side of that conversation, the value is that a woman has a right to choose her health care. She has the right to take care of her body. That's a values set of ideals. On the other side, there's a values set of ideal of people saying a child has a right to live no matter what. Those are two values. As I said, I'm not weighing in here. I'm just pointing out that those are two values that are in conflict with each other. And where we come into conflict often is when people that hold one set of values want to then impose their values on others. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine recently about a beloved neighbor who is finding the error of her spiritual path and wanting to help her find salvation. Turns out she's not looking for salvation. Right? We've all been there, right? Here, what you understand to be true is not my version of reality, and I'd like to share with you mine so that you can find the right way, right? It's always so effective. So when we understand that the values are not the problem, but it is our own interpretation and then our own desire to impose those. So where values can divide us, they can also unite us. So in this conversation that we began to have, we realized our communities did not have shared values. And so what we began to see was there was conflict and there was things showing up, even amongst a group of people that essentially all believed the same thing. So we began to redefine for ourselves, what values do we hold most dear as spiritual community? What set of values would we agree to that would guide us as we move forward in life and as a spiritual community? And so we went through a very long and exhaustive process of surveying all our different communities and coming together, and we came up with some shared values that guide our organization today. And we said, here's what we want to have as an organization. Open communication. That information and insight flow openly and dynamically in our community, which enhances creativity, engenders a sense of inclusion, and nurtures an efficient resolution of misunderstandings and conflict. You see, because unshared values are a great source of conflict. I love the conversation that I hear people speak of sometimes, and they say in the political realm, they'll say, you know, the family values voters believe this, which is to imply that those of us who have a different definition of what family is somehow don't value family, right? It's just we define it differently, right? And so we sometimes use these words. So we looked at, let's have ways that we can create an open space so that when conflict occurs, and it will occur, have you noticed this? If you have more than one person in the room, chances are there will be conflict. Sometimes there's conflict with just one person in the room. I mean, you know, you know what I'm talking about. I have that conversation with myself often, but, you know, it's enhanced when there's more than one. So open communication becomes a shared value. We wanted to have teamwork, that at all levels we work together to achieve our goals and to develop an even richer and more involved and impactful community. We wanted to have accountability. We said we manifest a natural accountability for our commitments, our actions, and community participation, and are thoroughly principled and constructive. You see, in our community, we often say, let your yes be yes or your no be no. And we're good either way. But what we do want to be able to say is we will hold you accountable for your commitments. If you say yes, we would expect you to fulfill them. If you say no, we say, cool, we love you, thank you. Because that's a powerful agreement. And if you can't fulfill a commitment, we invite you to renegotiate. This is a different way of being together so that we can count on each other. We went on to further define demonstration. We are dedicated to living out our values and principles and to advancing our vision and mission at all levels of our community. In other words, we're not just going to talk the talk, we will walk the talk. We always are actively working to have our outer lives be a reflection of our inner belief. We have vision facilitators. As a guiding principle, our leadership involves as many as possible in service to this vision and mission. We don't have a hierarchical structure, unfortunately, because I would get to be in charge and I could tell you all what to do and you would do it. Obviously, we do not have that structure in place. We have another one where everybody gets to have a voice, and we're developing our leaders as facilitators of a common vision. It's a beautiful principle. And then our spiritual practice, that we have affirmative prayer and meditation and visioning, and that we believe that we use our spiritual practices to anchor our personal and collective spirituality. You see, I am absolutely convinced that why our building is coming into being and is unfolding as easily and joyously as it is because we spent 2 years prior to this in spiritual practice together. We held a consciousness for what is unfolding. Now, we did work at a physical level, don't get me wrong, but the collective consciousness of the work that we have done now is making itself demonstrated, making itself known in the world, and that's a beautiful thing. So I was reminded this week, being the 4th of July and all, which is one of my favorite holidays. I kind of like them all, but I particularly love the 4th of July because it is such a profound shift in consciousness. And I don't think we always realize this. In fact, I'm convinced we don't always realize this. Over this last few days, HBO replayed the John Adams miniseries. And if you have never seen it, I would invite you to go get the box set and sit down and watch it. It is an amazing piece of theater and history. Well done. Sometime I'll tell you my little story around that whole, how that came into being, but I won't today. But in this wonderful mini-series, and this actually I started when I met David McCullough at the Writers' Conference a number of years ago. I was so impressed with what he was saying, it released not only my inner Muppet, but my inner geek. And I became fascinated with Revolutionary War history. The biographies of these very ordinary men who did extraordinary things. And more importantly, their extraordinary wives who never get credit. Some things never change, right? Yeah, I know. Come on, let's hear it for the gals. In fact, if you ever want to read a great book, Cokie Roberts wrote a wonderful book a number of years ago called Founding Mothers. And it's a brilliant piece of work. No, you deserve it. So think about this. What happened? Because we've all grown up in such a way that we just kind of take it for granted. But if you think about our American history, if you remember, think back to a time of sitting in a classroom somewhere, you may remember that we were a colony, there were colonies of the British Crown. And the king was a little bit of a pain. And he wanted to take all our money, but he didn't want to give us representation. And so, in fact, what they had done is created monopolies where we were taxed for things that we had no choice about buying, hence the Tea Party that eventually happened. And so in this colony of rebellious people who decided to go across the ocean to found a new nation, they began to have conversations about how do we reestablish ourselves in such a way. And there was a great debate that went on over many, many years about the best way to do that. How do we remain a colony, as Canada has done? Or eventually, as things got more out of hand and the king seemed completely unreasonable, the decision was made that we would become our own independent nation. This was not a decision that was made lightly, and it was a decision that those involved in that decision knew could cost them everything. And so in this process, when finally the Congress came together and they voted unanimously, after much work to get to unanimity, to declare ourselves an independent and free nation. And I want to share with you because it's so powerful and profound. We've all heard it, but listen with new ears, because it states our shared values as a country. In Congress, July 4, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are later to become all people. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, how many times have we all heard this and read this? But what I want us to understand is the profound step forward for all humanity that says this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Until this time, that was not so. We take it absolutely for granted that every person in our country has the right to determine their life, that every person in this country has the right to vote and declare who they select as their government. This was not the case before. Now, I recognize that even as we were putting forth these values, slaves were building the buildings that would house our democracy, right? But the ideal is set. And when we set the ideal, then we strive to live towards those goals, to those objectives. And so our march over the last 200 years, or 200 and however many years, keeps being towards a more perfect union, where everyone, see, it turns out we left out women, oops, and we didn't really, because the consciousness was such, there was a grand bargain about this, about slavery, but that could not stand. And so our march towards our more perfect union is always to fulfill the ideals that these brilliant men, ordinary brilliant men, created in putting forth an ideal for who we should be. So as I mentioned last week, to me, you have civil rights, you have gay rights, you have all the rights. I don't know who's next, but until everyone gets to live in according to that ideal, we'll keep moving forward towards it. It has not been a beautiful, easy, perfect thing, has it? It is an ongoing struggle to live according to our ideals. So too is our own ordinary lives as we set an ideal for ourselves and then we compare our actions against our ideal. I find myself saying I hold as a value compassion, and then I watch how I am in the world sometimes. I say I hold as an ideal patience, and I'd like it right now. Thank you very much. Right? So I hold these ideals that I strive for, but I don't live up to them all the time, and it's okay. We as a nation have not always lived up to our ideal. There's some glaring and obvious errors in our way, but we keep moving towards who we want to become. So too do we as spiritual community set for ourselves ideals of having open communication. We don't always practice it perfectly. We set for ourselves an ideal of congruence, that our words match our actions. Most of the time we're good. Every once in a while, oops, but we know where to go. So the value of values is that it can bind us together as community, just as these values that are inhabited in the Declaration of Independence have bound us together as a nation, that we continue to work towards that high ideal, and that we're not going to be satisfied until it is the truth and reality for everyone. As I look around at the world today, what I see, Egypt is just the most recent example. Egypt is in turmoil. And because I believe it is a divine impulsion for spiritual beings to experience freedom. And when there are governments in place that don't allow that freedom to be expressed, then, as we have so beautifully, it's okay for the people to say, we will choose a government that serves us. So while you can look at the news and say, oh my God, the world's falling apart, I see a larger emergence. That this spiritual impulsion is for one of freedom. Dr. Holmes speaks at great length about the same power that binds us is the same power that frees us. And that through our own thinking, we can achieve freedom. We can achieve liberty. Not necessarily from the things of the world, but the things that bind us are really the things in our own mind, aren't they? So we get to always look at our prejudice. I always get to look at where am I withholding love? And that's my next opportunity for growth. Because it is the spiritual master's teacher that we should love everyone. That we should love those who have harmed us. That we should pray for those who we perceive as our enemies. That whatever is the question, love is always the answer. And so he taught us to forgive freely and generously. As we move forward, what I'm very profoundly aware of is that it is from our values that we either create community or we create conflict. It is not that one group of people have no values and others have values. It is everybody has values, but they may want to impose theirs. They say ours are the right values. And therefore I have the right to impose my value set upon you. And if I have to kill you to get you there, well, sorry, but that's just the way it goes sometimes, right? So in our community, it's important, I think, that we revisit from time to time. Every Sunday, we speak our mission statement, that we honor our divinity and our humanity, that we're on a journey together, because our goal, our purpose, our mission in life is to have each and every person that joins us recognize their inherent divinity, their inherent worth, that they are created by the one Creator in the image and likeness of the divine, which is to say that all that is true for each one of us is that we are wholeness, perfection, love, joy, harmony right now. We in our community value diversity. We think diversity is cool. I like that we have lots of different kinds of people here that may not get together otherwise. I mean, look around. You wouldn't want to hang out. No, I'm kidding. You wouldn't. You don't want to hang out with these people, right? No. They say that one of the most segregated places on earth is Sunday morning in our churches, right? Where everybody kind of looks the same. I like that we look different, that we have different lifestyles, that we have different things. And we celebrate that. We say everybody brings a different vision and a different perspective on reality. In fact, I'd like to see more of it, but we're working on that. So we value diversity. Some traditions value conformity. Some of you came from those traditions and you obviously didn't fit. So you had to find us. And we're glad we can be here for you. So when we're creating this community, that's why I felt like it was important. Let us revisit the values that we hold. Let us revisit who we are and what we're about. We are not about creating a building. The building is the effect. And yet, how wonderful it will be that when we can move into our new place, we can further or expand our ministry and our message to reach local communities, to reach across the planet. We're in the process of developing a relationship with a little group that's forming in the Ukraine. That's exciting to me. Our last Sunday in this building will be the last Sunday in August. It is my hope, prayer, and firm intention that our first Sunday in September will be in our new building. If not, stay tuned. That's why we want everybody's email address, because it may get interesting. But join with me in knowing it's all unfolding perfectly. So what I'd like us to do is now just take a moment to be in prayer together. If you'll join me. For how good it is to stand in the awareness of the ever-present reality that is Divine Spirit, of this one intelligence, this one divine life that expresses itself in, through, and as all creation. For it is the Spirit that is taking form as this universe in which we live. And so everything is an extension of the one. That the same divine intelligence that causes the planets to be in perfect balance and motion, the same intelligence that causes the rains to fall, the flowers to grow, is the same intelligence animating each of our lives and our very being. It is written in this presence that we live, move, and have our being. And so we celebrate this now as we connect with that higher sense of being and self. For what I know is each of us represents a unique facet of the one. Each of us is a unique extension of the one life making itself known into form and into being. So I speak the word of truth this day for each of us gathered here as I recognize our inherent wholeness. And I know that that wholeness expresses as perfect health as well-being. I speak the word of truth as I recognize our inherent abundance, for we are one with the inexhaustible supply and source of all that is. I speak the word of truth this day as I recognize love as the only reality. That this presence and this power is always in perfect harmony with itself. And so I speak the word of truth for each of us gathered here, knowing we are lifted up into a higher realm of consciousness, a higher realm of awareness that the masters have known and shared with us. I am reminded of those powerful words when Jesus spoke and said, if you will seek this spiritual dimension, this kingdom of heaven as he called it, then all these things shall be added unto you. And so we seek and we find this spiritual dimension. We live our lives according to those high values of love, of harmony, of peace. And we allow that to be made manifest in our life and in our affairs. How good it is to stand witness to the presence and the power that is forever seeking its highest self-expression. And so I bless this spiritual community, for I know that it is a divine idea unfolding in peace, in love, and joy, abundantly and in all ways. And we extend a blessing from this place to our brothers and sisters around the planet as we sense and know and accept a planet at peace and a world that works for everyone. How good is it to know this divine presence is always seeking its highest expression. And so we take a moment, as we always do, to bless all teachers and ministers of all faiths. We bless all religious paths that bring forth greater spiritual awareness and greater spiritual demonstration. We know that there are many pathways to the divine, and we honor and celebrate them all. This is the truth that I know. And so it is with a profound sense of joy and gratitude that I simply give thanks for this inner awareness, releasing it to that law of mind which knows what to do and how to do it for the highest good of all concerned. I simply release, I let go, as together we say, and so it is.